Welcome to the human side of wealth. I'm your host, Andrew Bouza, Director of Financial Planning at RWA. We're going to dive into one of the most significant financial shifts in history, the Great Wealth Transfer, to help you understand what it is, what it means, and how it could impact you and your loved ones. Now, I'm very excited to welcome to the show today our family office managing directors, Jennifer Vitano and Evelyn Pepe. Jennifer, Evelyn, so excited to have you on the show.
Thanks, Andrew. We're excited to be here.
Thanks, Andrew. Thrilled to join the conversation.
So let's start at the top, help our listeners understand this big term, right? The Great Wealth Transfer. Jennifer, how would you describe, what this is when we mention this?
So the Great Wealth Transfer is the largest intergenerational transfer of wealth in history. We're looking at $80 to $120 trillion over the next decade. Baby boomers are those born between 1946 and 1964, and today represent approximately 20% of U.S. population. However, they possess more than half of U.S. wealth. So as baby boomers start to pass away, assets will begin to shift and transfer to women in the next generation.
Wow, that's a staggering figure, right? 80 to 120 trillion. Evelyn, why, when we think about this level of wealth, why is so much of this expected to land with women, would you say?
Yeah, so there are several reasons, but Jennifer and I would like to highlight three statistics because the research is so important. Longevity is a big one. Women are outliving men. According to the CDC, women outlive men by an average of 6 years. And then there's a recent Pew Research Center study that determined, on average, men in the US marry women who are about 2.2 years younger. And so we can clearly see that as wealth passes from men who are in control of the wealth today, women will be the key beneficiary. Add to that the rise of gray divorce, which is a term coined to describe divorce for those aged 50 and over. According to a recent study that was published in PubMed, about 36% of all adults getting divorced today are aged 50 or over. And this is such a big increase that accelerates wealth into the hands of women. If we just compare this to like 10, 20, or 30 years ago. And then last but not least, women represent the sole or primary income earners in approximately 40% of US households. And this is according to recent US Census Bureau data. And so all of this means that women will control more wealth than ever before.
There's a lot there for us to think about. And you mentioned longevity, this rise of divorce, like you mentioned, women, primary income earners in many U.S. households. And so when you think about control, Jennifer, kind of give us a sense of scale there. Like how much control are we talking about?
Yes, great questions. So if we think about the amount today, women control about a third of U.S. household wealth. And statistics are estimating that within a decade, that's expected to jump significantly to nearly 2/3. Evelyn and I heard an interesting statistic recently from the Financial Transition Institute that states 80% of men pass away still married. 80% of women pass away single. So this great wealth transfer that we're talking about is really just such a seismic shift that will have such an impact and reshape financial planning and investing, particularly for women and the next gen. And, you're hearing quite a bit of statistics. Evelyn and I researched quite a bit of data, but we are already really seeing this shift in the work with our clients.
That's a really interesting statistic. 80% of men pass away while married. 80% of women pass away single. It's sort of like a combination of all these things starts to highlight where you can see where this great wealth transfer is coming from, and almost like the inevitability of it feels like. And so, Evelyn, to kind of pull on that thread a little bit. What do you feel like this means for families and advisors both?
Jennifer and I think a lot about this, what it means for the
Hmm.
future of the industry. And we think that education and empowerment become critical.
Mm.
Historically, women were left out of financial conversations and decision making. I mean, it's hard to imagine, but it wasn't until 1974 that women could open a bank account or obtain credit like a mortgage or a credit card without a male cosigner. It's kind of mind blowing.
Yeah, it
Um,
really is.
it is, and as a result, many women were and are faced with an uphill battle during life transitions like widowhood or divorce. This great wealth transfer, as we mentioned, is truly a once in a generation opportunity to change that. And as trusted advisors, we feel that it's an incredible opportunity for us to help women turn this historic shift into what can be lasting financial confidence and an enduring legacy.
And Jennifer, you mentioned, we've talked about this before, right? The three of us have that. It's not just about money, as we think about this wealth transfer. And just to plug the title of the podcast, the human side of wealth, right? We're talking about more than just maybe dollar signs. It's about confidence too, potentially, as we think about this. So maybe let's expand on that if we could for a minute or so.
Yes, absolutely. So, many of us are really familiar with the income gap between men and women, and that results in what we call a wealth gap. But there's also an investing gap, and that's really where men are twice as likely to invest to grow their money compared to women. And many believe that this is tied to confidence and education. And so our goal is to close that investing gap. And we can do so by providing resources, guidance, and really a safe space for women to ask questions and help them feel empowered to make informed decisions. So, women are often viewed as risk averse, and we like to think of them as being risk aware. And to many women, it's important that they don't feel like this need to just act impulsively and make decisions, but that they have the opportunity to fully understand their options and choices. And so we feel it's really critical and really this incredibly pivotal moment to engage our clients into having meaningful conversations, not just about investing, but about creating a legacy. And we believe there are just countless ways to create a lasting impact. And we believe it's essential that clients feel empowered to really define and express what matters most to them.
What do you see out there in terms of trends that might give you some hope that the tide is turning?
Thanks, Andrew. That's a great question. And there are so many positive trends. I'll call a few out. Studies show that women are starting businesses at record rates. 49% of new businesses in 2024 were founded by women. I mean, that truly excites us.
Mhm.
Studies also show that women are graduating with advanced degrees at higher rates than men, and they're increasingly leading household financial decisions. The momentum is clearly there.
RWA specifically, what role do we play in this shift?
Yes, so we're focused right now on really continuing to build a platform that engages, educates, empowers, and really connects women and those next gen wealth stewards. And so we're putting together events, workshops, continuing our personalized planning, and we really, really want to help our clients align their wealth with purpose and legacy.
It's exciting. I'm very excited for that to get going. Really feel like our clients are going to get a lot out of that. Um, I want to shift gears for a second, and just understand a little bit about, Evelyn, starting with you. Kind of what's your why behind all this? Like what about this specifically?
Thanks for asking. It certainly goes back to my upbringing. I didn't know that I wanted to be a wealth advisor when I was younger. It wasn't like a light bulb went off at an early
Mhm.
age. Although as I share, you'll come to see why I think this is an incredibly rewarding career to be in,
Mhm.
especially as a woman. Um, but my parents were both immigrants, and they instilled a sense of entrepreneurship and being financially responsible at a very young age. In high school, it still wasn't a clear path. I became enamored with biology and anatomy and decided to pursue a health studies degree in undergrad. But the idea of running my own business and helping others was always going through my head. And I thought that I could develop a broader set of skills if I pursued business and finance degree. And so halfway through college, I made the switch. Again, if I think back to my childhood, my parents had, um, you know, to teach themselves everything they knew and had few people that they could go to for advice or who they could trust. And looking back, this shaped a lot of my experiences with money and people. Early in my life and career, I saw how overwhelming money could be for so many, how it shaped people's fears, their dreams, and their sense of security. We see this every day with our clients. Wealth is deeply personal, and money has so much more meaning to our clients than just the value of the
Mm.
dollars, as you said, Andrew, earlier. And as I mentioned, my parents were both immigrants and came to this country with nothing and managed to build a future for themselves, their children, and their grandchildren. It's truly a beautiful legacy. But again, they also struggled, like many, with financial uncertainty and navigating a system they weren't familiar with. And I remember watching them make tough decisions and wishing they had someone objective to guide them, someone who understood their goals, but also the challenges that they faced. And so, I know now that I wanted to be the person that my family needed when they were building their financial future. And so for me, this role and career in wealth management is all about empowering people and making sure no one feels alone in their financial journey. And I'm fortunate to be able to do that every single day.
That's great. Well, your family is lucky to have you with yeah, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. Well, that's great. That's an awesome origin story from where
Thank you.
that passion comes from.
Yeah.
Jennifer, curious to hear your story as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So Evelyn and I actually started out on a similar path. I went to college to become a physical therapist and was all
Oh,
in and
interesting.
absolutely loved the content that I was
Yeah.
studying. But in the middle of sophomore year, my father actually started day trading, and he knew that I loved numbers, and he just started to really share what he was doing. And I immediately became fascinated with the market, just how stocks traded, technical analysis. I just seeing how money could grow. So I decided between sophomore and junior year that I would get a job in the financial services industry. So I was really fortunate. I spent the summer working in the industry. I asked a ton of questions. I read every single thing I could get my hands on, the Peter Lynch books, Ben Graham, John Bogle, Jeremy Siegel, and so many others. And so going into junior year, I switched my major to math and economics and just became determined to become an analyst and a portfolio manager. So I studied and passed the CFA and was really on the investment track. And as much as I loved investments, and I still do today, I realized once I started working with individuals that although investments were really important, portfolio management was really only one slice of the pie. And I realized pretty early on that wealth isn't only measured by a portfolio, and we subscribe to that certainly today, that human side of wealth. And really those conversations outside of investments are deeply meaningful and involve family, estate planning, taxes, charitable giving, insurance, legacy planning. And I just want to be a part of all of those discussions with clients. And, that's what led me to, pursuing the CFP and changing my focus to be more of a comprehensive wealth advisor. And I just truly feel very fortunate to love the work that we do and really believe it's a privilege to work with our clients.
Well, we've got a group of lifelong learners here. How about that?
Mhm.
Getting the CFA, CFP. It's a lot, but like you said, it's great now. Got this knowledge based science. I find too, we've got all the knowledge, and then kind of translating that into how we put it into action inside of a financial plan. And Steve and I talked about this on our first episode. It's that
Mhm.
implementation piece and helping kind of simplify. Um, that's that's sometimes the hardest part, right? Of
Absolutely.
putting together a good financial plan.
The peace of mind, though, that it provides
Yes,
is the most rewarding part.
absolutely. Well, we've covered a lot of good ground here. Evelyn, if you could leave the listeners with one takeaway, what would you say?
Oh gosh, I have many,
Yeah,
but
just one. Just
I
you know
think
what? If it's two, that's fine.
that's okay. So I think if I could leave our listeners with just one thing, it would be, don't wait to begin understanding your finances. Whether you're inheriting wealth, building it, or planning for your future, get involved now. Stay
Hmm.
curious, ask questions, seek advice, and make your voice part of the conversation. At RWA, it's critical that our clients feel heard and understood.
It's great, man. Jennifer, what would your takeaway be from everything we talked about today?
Yeah, like Evelyn said, it's tough to pick, just one, but I would say, view
Yeah.
your wealth as really a powerful tool. Use it intentionally and by your specific design and to help create security, opportunity, and an impact, for you today and also for the generations to come.
A lot of planning to do. How about that? And I think like you both said, you're both here to help. We're here to help as a partner at RWA. Um, and I loved this. Thank you so much for both of you for sharing your insights. Would love to have you back on the show to do more episodes in the future.
Oh, we'd love to. Thank you so much for having us, Andrew.
Thank you, Andrew. That sounds great. We're always excited to talk about the great wealth transfer and everything finance and wealth related.
All right, very good. Thank you both.
Thanks, Andrew.
Thank you.
All right, Jennifer and Evelyn, great stuff there. Now I'm very excited to bring in Steve Reeder. He's the president of private wealth at RWA. And you've seen him before. We've done a couple of episodes together. It's great to have you back. And we're excited to hear you weigh in on this topic on the great wealth transfer and helping families, think through that on a personal level. I know that when we were chatting and getting ready to do this episode, you have a personal story that you can share around this as well. So, Steve, great to have you back.
Yeah, thanks for having me back again. I appreciate it and looking forward to this conversation. It is such a great conversation and I think it's something that, everyone's has to deal with at some point in their life. And we talk about
Mhm.
the wealth transfer. It's, as Evelyn had mentioned, the averages are pointing towards the fact that the women will be the ones left with the financial decisions at the end. And, on average,
Mhm.
women live 6 years longer. On average, they marry someone 2.5 years older, but those are averages. And so
Mhm.
many times we see the averages, how they have outliers. And, I got to witness one of those firsthand, which is my grandmother was 5 years younger than my grandfather, and she outlived him by 21 years. And so she was an absolutely amazing woman. After she passed, she lived by herself in a second floor condo. There was no elevator. She walked the stairs nearly every day until she was 98, and when she eventually moved into assisted living. But up until she was 105, her absolute favorite thing to do was to go to the casino and play the slots. And she was very
Love it.
strong. Yeah, very independent. She, it's one I'm sure that to hear Evelyn and Jennifer talk about what's happening and the trends that are happening, she'd be very excited to see. Love all the important work that they and others are doing and the progress that we're seeing in the industry is just amazing. But she also came from a different generation, and it's one that I think many of our clients either were part of or maybe impacted by. And I just think about like an example. My grandmother never drove. Everywhere she went when she was older, my grandpa had to drive her. When she was younger, she took the bus. But a lot of this was like that dependency there. And I think this spilled over into other aspects of their life, including finance. And she didn't have a deep understanding of the finances. And she was engaged a little bit in the bill pay, and wasn't starting from ground zero when my grandfather passed. But my parents really had to step in and get involved and really help pull things together, help her with Social Security, help her with her budget. And I think the assistance kind of naturally happens as you age. But when you look at the numbers, so many of the married women out there are likely to find themselves in a very similar situation to this, and we want to make sure that everyone's prepared for it.
Right. I think we've both seen this play out, and that's an incredible story. First of all, living to 105, probably because she was climbing the stairs every day. I would guess. And I know we've talked about this before too, where a lot of times you'll see one spouse is sort of the functioning CFO, the chief financial officer of the family. And so, yeah, if you're someone who's left in that position where maybe you didn't have all the financial knowledge, and you're already dealing with a difficult situation with a spouse passing, how do you think about, best practices to help people get ahead of that a little bit, maybe deal with this sooner rather than later?
Yeah, I think death in general is a tough topic that most people don't want to have to address. I mean, we're all going to, but to talk about it can be a little uncomfortable. And so I actually have a question that I really like to ask if I see that gap where there's maybe not engagement from both spouses. And I ask them, do you want to get comfortable with this now while you're a little bit younger? Or would you like to have to figure it out at 85, which is the age my grandma had to face it when she lost my grandfather?
Right. Yeah, that kind of makes it feel real, and kind of makes the idea of, okay, let's mentally start to think about how this could get confronted now. I feel like it's a lot of that way in financial planning. It's sort of we've got to take our medicine now, deal with the problems up front, and not let them kind of idle for a long time. So as you ask that question, what does that kind of lead into for what you see, what you recommend people actually start doing to get ahead of them?
Yeah, I think there's really kind of three things that we'll focus on, which is one is be part of the discussion now. For example, for me, with my background, I do handle the vast majority of our finances, but at least once a year, my wife and I will sit down, we'll review our net worth, highlight our accounts, what type of accounts we have, where the life insurance policies are if something were to happen, what happens to our accounts. And we have a trust in place. We have two young children. And so what does that mean? And I think this understanding really helps give a peace of mind. And I think at the end of the day, that's what we're looking to accomplish, is to make sure people feel comfortable with their situation so that they're not worrying about it. And in my experience, there are many couples, they're not having these kind of conversations at home, and it's creating a little bit of the gap. I think another thing is to educate yourself. There's just so many resources out there that you can get a better understanding of finances, lots of books and podcasts. My standard graduation gift I give for high school graduation is a book. It's called The Richest Man in Babylon. And it's a classic novel. It's like 100 years old. And it really teaches about the basics of just the mentality of being financially responsible. And it really does hit on the basics of things people should think about. And so resources like that, there's so many podcasts out there. If you have like a Susie Orman or Dave Ramsey and a lot of others who have been addressing this at kind of a more basic level that people can connect to that maybe aren't industry experts, but you can learn a lot from hearing other people talk about it. And the third is, and I think it's really important, is just have a clear plan in place. If something were to happen, what should we do? Now, I may be a little bit biased on this one, but I have seen the benefit of having an advisor involved that both spouses are comfortable with. before the event occurs. So if you were to lose one of the spouses, if you already have that engagement, you've already had those conversations, generally speaking, you have everyone on the same page. The plan in place is much more likely to be in motion or to get set in motion, and to avoid some of the disruptions if you already have those relationships and have had those conversations. But I think, in my opinion, that good plan above all else is going to help drive confidence, as I mentioned. So many people have a lot of fear and anxiety around their finances. They avoid that conversation. They don't want to have to face it. And I think the world gives us enough anxiety as it is. And I just really love to help people control what they can't control and add a little bit of a peace of mind by making sure that they're having these conversations ahead of time.
Yeah, having the conversation now, I think, like you said, at least once a year, that sit down, with both spouses, with an advisor, who I think a productive meeting where everyone has a voice inside of that meeting, so important, that and have a platform to be able to share, what's on their mind, what questions they have, feeling comfortable around that. Certainly, we try to do that with our clients too. I have to read that. I've never read The Richest Man in Babylon.
Yeah, it's a good one.
So I'm gonna check that out. But I didn't know you when I graduated high school, so I guess that's why I didn't get it. But that's all really good advice. And well, I mean, again, living to 106, that's incredible. What do you feel like was the secret to her living that long?
Yeah, it's funny. I've gotten asked that a lot. People that knew her, and when she passed, definitely a question that came my way. And I just really think that, to me, the answer was really obvious. When you saw her energy, she just never stopped living. She stayed very active. She really enjoyed every day. And as I mentioned, she'd go out. She'd go to the casino every single week. My mom would take her there and she'd play her quarter slots. And it's just like, wanting to go to dinner. We'd take her to dinner regularly, out to restaurants. She loved to go out. She played cards with her friends in assisted living. But she had that confidence, and that, I think, like, having the confidence that she was able to go out and live, that she was able to support the lifestyle, understanding, what her budget was and what she could spend. I mean, her typical budget at the casino was typically like $40. It wasn't high roller here, but like, she understood that and she enjoyed it. And in my opinion, that's what makes all the difference in the world. It's the big reason that this topic is so important to me. It's, can we give people the confidence to live the life that they want to live, that they enjoy? And I think if you're having a life that you're happy with, that you're enjoying, you're staying active, you just keep that, you keep that spirit, you're going to live a long, happy life, assuming nothing else happens. She was very healthy.
It's great. I think it gets lost a lot of times in financial discussions, which, again, as we think about, the human side of wealth, of course, the financial stuff matters. There's no question about that. But when someone's getting ready to retire, or they want to do the things that they enjoyed, while maybe they weren't working, now they finally have time to travel, do these things. You said staying active, staying social, having that outlet, so important. That should absolutely be part of the conversation, to kind of start to think about planning out your life and your goals and what you want to accomplish. So great stuff
without a doubt. And I think one of the things you can see in that planning process, and you mentioned earlier, if there's only one voice in that conversation, are you building a plan around both people's life or just one person's life? And so many of our families, there's so many other players that you want to at least make sure both spouses are involved in that, or else you're going to build a plan success doesn't look the same for both people in many cases.
Well, great stuff, Steve. Thanks for joining us again on an episode. This is going to become a recurring thing. I can feel it.
My pleasure. Thanks so much for having me. I enjoy being here.
Well, Steve, thank you very much for joining us, as well as Jennifer and Evelyn. This has been a fantastic episode. It does bring us to the close of another episode of The Human Side of Wealth. And thank you out there so much for listening, spending some of your time with us. Hopefully, you got a lot out of this episode. I know that I did. I've been your host, Andrew Buza, and we hope to see you on the next one. Um, we talked a lot about here on this episode and teased a little bit at the end of this episode, translating what some of this planning really means in terms of turning it into tangible short, medium, long-term goals and helping you achieve them. So we'll be visiting those kind of topics on future episodes as well. But until then, please visit us at rwawealth.com. Thanks again, and we'll see you soon.